Hello and welcome to the Biz Coach Show, hosted by my Biz Coaches and presented by the TLG Group. Our show is focused on giving entrepreneurs the edge they need to succeed. Your host for the show today and always, it's David Bacon, that's me, and Eric Whitmore. Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, David. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Always good to be with you, talking about business and entrepreneurship and all sorts of other fun stuff. And we just invite you, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. We're talking always about important things, timely things, straight off the headlines and things that impact your business. And so we'd love to connect with you, and we'll talk more about how to do that at the end of the show. But as of right now, we just encourage you to like and subscribe so you don't miss future shows and episodes. Today, we are going to be talking about community questions. And so as we've got 6 episodes under our belt, this is now episode 7, we've started to get some questions from our audience and also just questions that come up in working with our clients. And we thought we'd dedicate an entire episode to some of the questions that we've been getting or that we get often. And our last episode, if you missed it, was about kind of artificial intelligence and automating your business and what that looks like for the future. And so one of the questions that kind of came from that was, how can I extend customer support beyond normal business hours? And how do we use technology and automation to do that? And Eric, I know you've got some thoughts on this, and would love to just maybe turn this question over to you and see what you might recommend for that individual.
Awesome. But yeah, David, we are putting a lot of energy and effort on automating and digitizing everything that we do with our clients. And that's in our experience, that's where the biggest opportunity for savings often is, particularly when it comes to cutting costs, which generally speaking is a side note for people who haven't engaged with us yet. One of the biggest opportunities to make an immediate impact to somebody's bottom line profitability, obviously dollars they put in their pocket, is often to go back and review what expenses you're incurring, what costs you're carrying, and figuring out ways to reduce those costs, right? In our particular case, I'm not trying to remove the human element or anything like that, which often comes up in these conversations. And I'm certainly not trying to, push a lot of jobs, but knowing the sensitive issues that we're struggling with right now in regards to retaining good quality people, more importantly, getting people to come work for us in some cases, right? Is where can we automate our business? Where can we digitize? Where can we automate? And when we're automating, how can we leverage AI, right? And so, simple question, what can I do to extend customer service hours? And in many cases, in the old days, it was you had to go get a call center, right, and contract a call center, and then you had to pay a dollar amount per call to have somebody answer the phone on your behalf, either extended hours or even during business hours, so that you could allocate your time and energy, your team's time and energy to producing, for selling, producing, and fulfilling on your product or service. And so by having this outside call center, you could have somebody kind of buffer that communication. Well, we can now do that through AI with simple things like chatbots that you can actually put on your website. That's actually probably the easiest and most effective way and super cost efficient to put chatbots on your website with a simple sequence of FAQs. Is often how they're set up. And now they're certainly more advanced than just a standard FAQ, because they can actually read the sequence of the series of questions. So you do need to know a little bit about your customer's experience. But if you can take the time to walk through a customer's experience and recognize what are some of the common challenges that come up, what are some of the common concerns, and pre-program the AI, it will iterate with each interaction, the right softwares. Well, what they'll do is it'll go through and it'll revise each time and update. And so what you actually get is initially it's a series of canned messages, which that's not necessarily ideal, but what it does is it evolves and it begins to answer questions, more in-depth questions, and consequently to a point where it can handle, in some cases, on a simple chatbot, as much as 80 to 90% of your basic questions that come in. And so depending on your business model, depending on your nature of requests or concerns that are coming in, you can typically handle, like I said, as much as 80 to 90% full without having to have any human engagement.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about, common questions that people get, return period, how long does it take for products to ship, right? Those sorts of things. Why utilize your precious labor hours and expense on those types of questions? Save that for the higher end stuff that requires more engagement.
Right, absolutely. But yeah, a chatbot, easy by far and away, one of the most simple applications, and they're what people would be surprised about how cost effective they are. They're really not that expensive and don't require a ton of technical skills. Generally speaking, if you can set up a Facebook profile or something like that, you can figure out these chatbot solutions.
Yeah, it's true. And a lot of them are becoming more kind of plug and play, where based on whether you have a WordPress site or whatever, any of the other site builders that are out there, or if you've got, a developer, whatever, you can plug these different applications into a number of different software platforms and web design platforms. So it makes it really easy.
Absolutely. Actually, another cheat code. We were through this with a client last week. Imagine using, as you're going through this and it's asking you for a series of frequently asked questions. So you can actually go into ChatGPT to bring that up specifically. You can go in there and we actually went through and said, okay, what are some of the questions people would ask about this service? And it spit out 10. And then we said, okay, give us 10 more. And it gave us 10 more. And we did 10 more, 10 more. And we literally used that to pre-program the chatbot with about 50 different questions. And at this point right now, I mean, we just introduced it and the client is at this point, they have only gotten one phone call that couldn't be resolved through the chat system.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah. and I bet they then went in and programmed that question, didn't they?
They did not, but that particular question I don't think would ever come up again. But you never know.
You always have those customers or clients, right?
That's right.
Nice. Okay. Well, great insight on that one. We've got another one, actually, kind of in a similar vein. We've been talking about technology a lot on the show. One of the questions is, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, is people that are struggling to stay current with the latest technology. So save our audience the backstory of, all their time is being spent on all these other things. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. But really, at the end of the day, I just don't know how I can stay up on all of this stuff because I already have so much happening in my life and my business. And so they're looking for any tips that you can share or we can share on how to stay current with all these technological advances because they seem to be happening at light speed.
Right. And it's only going to get worse. Yeah. And I mean that with all the best. I think it's phenomenal, but I never claimed to be a technical guy. As a matter of fact, I'd probably one of the more least technical people because I'll
vouch for that.
What's that?
I'll vouch for that.
You'll vouch for that. Yeah. Thank you. But what I do know, and this is as you joke, right? But the reality is I know enough of what's available out there because I read a handful of emails that give me some really good insight. I will occasionally jump on webinars that are talking specifically about newer technologies just to see what's evolving. One of my favorite things to read, the new CEO for Microsoft. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he did, I believe it was a symposium or something like that where he was speaking at, and I'm going to bet you it was some kind of AI function. What they did is they transcribed what he spoke about at the event, broke down into, I think it was 11 or 12 key bullet points of things that we should be looking at for just 2023 and the impact that technology is going to have with business, not necessarily small business per se, but certainly with business as a whole. But there were 11 or 12 key bullet points. And so I'm perusing those and I'm like, okay, boom, that one's really important. That one's going to be really super relative to my clients. And there's another one. Oh, that's going to impact an entire category of business, right? For insurance, I can't remember specifically, but it was like the entire insurance category is going to be affected by this particular one. So I started going through those 12 bullet points, and it was something as simple as that. It takes a little bit of understanding of these different businesses, but that's what we do as coaches, right? We're constantly evaluating that. And my Biz Coaches, that again, I mentioned before, but we're putting more and more emphasis on that because we believe that the enhancements of technologies are going to come so fast now that people aren't going to be able to keep up. And I remember literally 15 years ago, Like the big deal was every year we would go to the CES show in Vegas, which is the Consumer Electronics Show. And that was like that and the CTIA show. And I can't even remember what the TIA stood for, but it was, there were the two big tech shows that you would go to a year. And that's where you would learn all your information. Anymore today, a simple subscription to Inc. magazine, or what's another good one? Entrepreneur's not quite as good as it used to be. There's a couple of different magazines out there that I recommend to some of my clients that want to stay out in front of this stuff, because a couple of articles, and with electronic submissions, you can literally just scroll through, pick out the 2 or 3 articles that you think are relevant for you, and you get the information you need. And it only requires maybe, I would say maybe half an hour, maybe an hour every 2 weeks. Is pretty much what I get to stay on top of this information. And of course, I'll always use my canned response, get a coach.
Yeah, right.
That's what a good coach should be looking at, and recognizing trends in industry information and things like that, and be able to look at that and extrapolate out of that and say, this is going to be super valuable for my client because they're in this industry, right? And so that's another piece. But it doesn't take that much, but it does require a discipline of doing a little bit of research and reading that information, and or listening to a podcast, which is another great way to do that.
Yeah. It's that push versus pull, right? And the coach not only is going to reach out to you proactively and, hey, I saw this and it may impact your business, which is awesome. And now it's individualized. And that's super helpful. So yeah, totally agree on that. You talked about kind of like, newsletters, podcasts, those things can be great. I think two other things I'd mention on that. One is, we always talk about, you don't have to do everything yourself. And oftentimes entrepreneurs take that on. You may have somebody in your business that's a little techie, and maybe they're kind of into that space. And, hey, you're deputized as my tech liaison, and I want you to spend, part of your time at work just looking up this stuff and relaying that information to me so we can stay future ready. I think that's a great way to do it. And then for me, one of the things I've started doing, like in the learning space as an example, is augmented reality, virtual reality, like all of that, the metaverse, right? Those are all things that are impacting learning space, and it's difficult to stay up on all of it. But I know that there are, thought leaders in that space that are constantly evaluating, and their whole, brand, so to speak, is that technology. So I just follow those guys on LinkedIn, and they're pushing out the latest articles. And so I don't have to go hunt for anything. I just follow, I get an alert when they push something out. I go check it out and say, oh, it's cool, or, oh, that's really interesting, I need to dive into that deeper. And so that's another thing you can do is, just follow a couple people that are thought leaders in a space or in your industry, but in kind of a tech nuance, and that can really help out too.
Yeah. You know what? I'll add one last piece. Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V is commonly referred to as, not that I don't appreciate his insight. I don't pay as much attention, or I had not in the past, but what I recognized, I went back and did some research and things that he's said, hey, this is coming. You need to pay attention to this. And usually at the end of the year, beginning of a new year, you get people say, here's the list of the 10 things you need to be prepared for this year, kind of thing. And so I went back and I did that because somebody had challenged me and said that he's really on point with a lot of this stuff. Now, remind you, he took over his parents' wine liquor store, I think it was, and wine was his big thing. And he started out selling that all over the United States. And that was how he built the business. And I want to say if it was $1 million a year, it was single digit millions. And he built it to over $60 million a year in gross revenue out of a single location liquor store. Say again.
Mostly through online sales, I believe. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And he was, he did it all through technology, recognizing, being able to sell online, building funnel, things like that. And so he was definitely ahead of his time. And he's one of those people that's recognizing that. And if you follow any of his content, whether it's videos on YouTube or TikTok or something like that, you listen to his content, I guarantee you he's giving you cutting edge information. He's telling you where you need to be paying attention. Again, I see him as one of those key thought leaders that I follow extensively.
Yeah. Great suggestion. Absolutely. Okay, well, let's move on. We got a couple more questions that we want to get to today. One is, when should I address an employee's problematic behavior? So I think, well, anybody that knows me has probably heard this expression before. I often tell people, what's the best part of my job? People. What's the toughest part of my job? People, right? So it's kind of
great phrase.
Yeah, especially if you have employees. So I think this one is definitely something we both live with. So I'll take a crack at this one first. I think
Please.
when it comes to the timing, early is better. I mean, really, my experience, and there's a lot of psychology and social science to support this, but people rarely change their own behavior without feedback and coaching from others. And so if you're hoping, they've started showing up a little late, I'm sure it'll get better on its own. I'd say 9 times out of 10, that's not going to be the case. In fact, it's probably going to get worse because they start thinking, well, they didn't really say anything when I was 5 minutes late, so I'm going to go 10 or 15. And then, I'm just going to call off a whole day. And so it becomes this, very slippery slope. And so from my experience, working in the talent development space, is people need to be have that course correction happen. And if you can do it early, it's kind of like when you're riding a horse. It's little pulls on the rein to kind of get back on course versus, waiting until you're driving a car and you're almost into the guardrail and you have to do these big jerks to get back and forth. And that's difficult for you. It's difficult for the employee. So start early. Start with little small adjustments. It's not a big catastrophic deal. It's just a little bit of feedback. And if the behavior corrects itself, awesome. We don't need to worry about it. If it doesn't, then we have another situation on our hand. And we got a whole thing on feedback and coaching that I know Eric or I could go into. But I think for me, the quick answer on that is early and often when it comes to problematic behavior. So anything you want to add on that, Eric?
Yeah, I probably taught you early and often, so I can't.
Probably. Or coach me as I was making mistakes. You coached me.
Well, that's it. Because you were making all those mistakes, I had to coach you. No, the early and often is definitely, it's funny as you asked the question, my immediate word is now. Now is the time to address it. Right now in this moment. And it's, to your point, for the years that we building that last company, one of the things that happened often was being a remote in my role as a director and eventually as an executive director, living in one area and then but overseeing 6 or 8 or 10 different markets, going into we've got a problem in this store and we're talking about severe issues. It's like I need to be present now, right? And this is before the era of the Zoom calls and fun stuff, but I need to be in the market now. Like I remember times taking a red eye to be in a market the next morning to address an issue because it was that severe, right? So it is every bit of now, and this the closer to now that it is, the better, because to your point, you need to address it. Well, it's there's a lot to the psychology, right? If I address it now, while the association is in the moment, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's the emotion, right? The emotion is tied to it, right? That's another key component, right? And you're left to think about it for too long, or if you're left as the leader to think about it too long, you may fester on it. And then when you have the conversation, it's to your point earlier, if I did let it out in little doses, it's more manageable for the employee. Whereas in your car analogy, where I'm in the gut or in the guardrail and I got to do the hard swerve, that never works out well when you're driving. It also doesn't work out well with people because they don't respond well to that, right? That's like you're going 0 to 60. And if you probably remember multiple times where I told you I had to have coaching sessions with directors or store managers even that were going 0 to 60. Like they let it go. And then all of a sudden they want to give them a final write-up. Yeah. And I'm like, that's not exactly how that's supposed to progress, right? Here's an issue here. And if you had those issues along the way and you didn't address them, you didn't give them ample opportunity to make an adjustment. And so consequently, now it's a bigger issue because now we're hinging on, is there potentially an issue with you're trying to push them out the door and they're trying to go for a wrongful termination suit or something crazy like that now, right? I mean, there's so many things that go into it. But to your point, it's early and often. You do it consistent, and you have consistent with your coaching when it comes to those types of things. If you do it with one person and don't do it with somebody else, that creates yet another challenge, right? Well, this person's they work really hard and they do more than the average person, so I give them a little slack. That's a problem. As soon as you do that, you've opened the window of opportunity for somebody else to work the angle and be like, well, so-and-so gets it. And you can't say, oh, they do these other tasks, because that's irrelevant. Yeah. What you're addressing is the particular activity or whatever it is that they're doing wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and what's interesting too, and I'm sure you've seen this, not always the case, but occasionally you'll come across people who didn't even realize it was a problem behavior. I mean, they just come from
absolutely
background, or maybe their previous employer, whatever, there's a million reasons, but like, hey, I didn't think it was that big a deal. Thanks for letting me know. Now that I know, I can change it. And if you don't have that communication, you're just carrying around that frustration and that stress. And there's no need to do that when a 30-second conversation could be that slight course correction. So
absolutely. Yep.
So, awesome. Well, yeah, another question kind of in a similar vein, actually. So we'll have to dive into that, maybe look at it from a different angle, is if you've got an employee that's underperforming, right? And they didn't specify what, metric or, job responsibility that was, but just underperformance in general. How should I go about addressing it? So you want to take the first crack at that one?
Sure. Yeah. Give me the hard one. No, actually, similarly, early and often, right? I mean, that's always consistent comes to coaching. But one additional thing, and we didn't incorporate this in the last one, but it definitely is even more relevant in this particular coaching scenario, is, notice that you're not achieving the goals that are set forth, right? Assuming that you've clearly identified the goals, which is a whole nother conversation, right? Underperforming, right? Have you done an effective job, you as a leader, whatever your role is, have you done an effective job of setting the expectation? What is that? Is that documented? Have you clearly defined what the goals are for the role, right? If you say underperforming, what does underperforming look like? If you're talking about sales performance, okay, well, those numbers, are they clearly documented? Do you know what the expectations are? Does the employee know the expectation that they should be achieving? If it's a operations role, what's the expectation? What's the output? What's the throughput that they're doing, achieving? How many documents should they create? Whatever that is, right? Come to some deliverables that are expected, and then clearly identify what those things are, right? So that you can. Another one is deadlines, right?
Yeah.
I need this next week. Well, next week when? Monday or Friday?
Monday or Friday. That's a big difference.
Exactly, right? And Friday morning or Friday evening, before I go home. It's like by not giving clear expectations, you're poorly setting the expectation for the employee to know whether or not they're achieving or not achieving goals, or meeting the performance expectations. So that's one, right? First and foremost, you got to look internally. When an employee's falling short, you got to look internally first. The thing you need to do is you need to ask them. I've noticed. So first and foremost, so David, your the expectation was for you to sell 10 this week.
Yeah.
And if you sell 10 every week for 4 weeks, you'll sell 40 phones. You'll achieve with your gross profit per transaction. You'll hit this GP number, gross profit number that we anticipate, and you'll be within, being a successful employee. I noticed that you're falling short of that over the last couple of weeks. Is there a particular reason why?
Yeah.
Right. So next I need to, once clearly I know the numbers, the metrics, we've discussed them in the past, you're familiar with them. Now is there a particular reason why you're not hitting your numbers? Now you'll probably get a plethora of excuses at that point as to why they're not doing it. There's not enough traffic. So-and-so keeps taking my sales, whatever those are. But then you have to do is you have to take each excuse and what do I want to say? Make it singular. What's the word I want? You take each excuse and deal with them independently.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So narrow each one down, get it to it's almost like a sale, right? Get the actual objection, get it independent of all the other objections, nail it down, overcome the objection, and then say, hey, now are you going to be able to achieve your goals? Well, actually, that's this other problem why I can't get this done. Okay, what's that problem? Okay, let's get to the nature of that. What's causing that? What do you think you could do differently? Okay, you can do this differently. Great. And then, but the key is to take every issue or concern or excuse, more specifically, narrow it down to as an independent excuse, absolve it, create a solution, have them create the solution, implement how they're going to absolve it. And then that way you can say, okay, so now we have an action plan for you to move forward and be able to achieve your goals, right? And you keep doing that until they have no more excuses. You've absolved all the excuses. Now you can move forward and say, okay, now we're both on the same page. Next week, we just expect you to hit or exceed your goal of 10 units or whatever that might be. So I think that's another big piece. So the first one is, are you giving a clear indication of what successful looks like? 2, take the time to understand why they feel like they're not achieving it, and then singularly go through each individual objection or excuse and to resolve it with some kind of solution or action plan to resolve it.
Yeah. No, I love it. That's amazing insight. And I think for me, one of the things I think about, again, I always take the training aspect into mind, right? Is I call it the $1 million question, which is, if somebody's not doing something they're supposed to do or not doing it as well as they're supposed to do, okay, the $1 million question is, if I were to go to that person and say, if you do it the way that I want you to do it, and I'll give you $1 million, could that person do it, right? Would they do it if the incentive was high enough? If the answer to that question is yes, then it's not a skill issue. They have the skill, they have the knowledge, they have the ability to do it. If you go to that person and say, they've got to do X and it needs to be done this way, and they couldn't do it, even if there's $1 million on the table, if they had an opportunity to go for it and achieve it, if they couldn't do it, then if they could do it, then it's a will issue. Sorry, I think I got it mixed up there. But so the $1 million question is, could they do it for $1 million or not? And if they can, they are choosing not to, and we need to break into exactly why that is. If they can't, then there's a possibility they don't have the knowledge, the skill, the resources they need to be able to do that job. So once you really kind of break that down and figure out where is the gap, right, it becomes really easy on the coaching direction you need to take with them. The flip side of that, though, is, let's say they have the skill and they have the will, but the performance still isn't there, right? So, hey, there's a lot of willingness, they have a lot of drive, and I know they have the capability of doing it, but it's not happening consistently. Then what is causing that? And I think that's kind of going back to what you talked about. Then you start getting into some of the other things. Is it, maybe there's some obstacle that we're not aware of. Maybe there's a lack of resources, right? So then we could start to get into the other real world challenges. But I think fundamentally you have to start with, do they have the skill? Do they have the willingness to do it? And if both of those pieces are there, it becomes a lot easier to solve it. If not, right, if they have the skill and they're just choosing not to, well, then that's a very different coaching conversation that we have to get into with that person.
Yep. So. Great add-on, right? And so basically that's the step between acknowledging, one, that they understand what the expectations are, and then my first step, which was, why do you think you're not achieving it, right? I mean, I'm allowing them the opportunity to tell me why they think they're not achieving it. But to your point, the clarification should be, if you're not achieving it, right, do you feel like you have the skill set that you need, right? And determining that, right? So by saying simple $1 million question, right? Yeah. Could you do it for $1 million? Yes, I could. Okay, so then you just have chosen not to do it, is what I'm understanding. Yeah. And then to your point, a different line of questioning.
Yeah, exactly. So, yep. And if it's a training gap, if it's a skill gap, well, you know who to contact for that, right?
That's right. Train, Lead, Grow. Yeah, Train, Lead. They will out your sales training protocol.
There you go. So awesome. Well, I think we hit that one. Let's kind of change it up a little bit, kind of move away from the employees a little bit. And we got a question. This is actually an interesting one. It was, someone has noticed a decline in the quality of work of one of their subcontractors. And they're not really sure, like, hey, it's not an employee. How do I go about addressing this with a subcontractor, and what does that look like? So any kind of guidance or thoughts on that?
Yes. I don't think it's any different, quite honestly. I think it's very similar to what we just addressed. I mean, there's some nuances to how you position, like the verbiage you might use. And, for instance, I've always found that if you draw to somebody where they're the decision maker as opposed to you, and say, if I continued to bring my deliverable to you at late 50% of the time, 20% of the time, whatever the issue is, right? Or lack of quality that requires me to have to do this much and more additional work or whatever that is. But if you, David, are my subcontractor and I'm outsourcing to you because I believe in your ability to get it done, and I believe in your work quality and things like that, and I really value your partnership. If you keep coming late with your deliverable to me or in media less than desirable quality, how would you handle that if the were reversed? How would you expect me to handle that if the roles were reversed? And they're like, well, I probably want to fire you. I'm like, well, then you know how I feel right now. It's like, no, I've only ever had somebody say that to me once, but they did actually say it. And they said, great, well, then you know exactly how I feel right now.
Right. Yeah. No, that's powerful, man. That's really powerful.
Yeah. Well, and the key is that, if you just turn the tails and say, turn the situation and put it back on them and say, if I was the one doing that to you, how do you feel? Right. So for instance, David, you did the work but it was a week. I expected it a week from now. You gave it to me 2 weeks from now. So I'm going to hold your pay for 2 weeks. Are you okay with that?
Right. Yeah.
Not likely. Not likely. And so, Now the interesting part that this actually brings up, David, is this is, in my opinion, both the previous questions, or maybe more specifically, the second one, the one about the performance, and what we're talking about here with the subcontractor. The hardest part in a leadership role is learning and being comfortable with having difficult conversations.
That's right.
My experience has been most people in a leadership role, particularly, newer people in leadership roles and small business owners, fall into that category because they don't typically have big teams. So they don't do a lot of coaching. And so if they don't have employees or don't have any employees, then dealing with subcontractors is a very similar scenario to having an employee. And part of the issue is they're struggling with calling somebody out not doing their job.
Yeah. Right.
And so the struggle for them particularly is the fact that they struggle with having that difficult conversation.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right and very spot on with the parallels there between the two. I think one of the things that's unique about the subcontractors, the skill component in that equation is really already solved for, right? You wouldn't have subcontracted that person if there wasn't an understanding that they had that skill set or they've demonstrated it on other jobs. So I'll have to figure out where I heard this, but one of the things I think is interesting, what often comes up in those conversations is, why is our quality lacking, or, why are we late to jobs, right? Oftentimes one of the things that I hear is, it was a misunderstanding. I didn't understand. And, I thought something else. And so one of the things that I heard many, many years ago and have used a number of times, it's very effective, is just asking the question, help me understand why every time there's a misunderstanding, it's to your advantage and not mine, right? They're never doing more than we've asked them to. They're never providing it earlier than we've asked them to. So why is it always to the advantage of the subcontractor and never to my advantage? And usually that's kind of like your question. It's one of those like, oh crap moments, they called me on it. They got me, I'm dead to rights. And I think that can be a really effective question to ask too.
Yeah. And I think that, in many cases, when you find a subcontractor relationship where you're not seeing or you're not happy with the performance of the results, often in my experience, having a subcontractor at times, it's because you're in it. You have this tendency to take on more than you can. And it's a natural occurrence within that role. I mean, just the sheer nature of a subcontractor role is that you're actually bringing in, aggregating business from different groups, and you don't want to say no because you don't know if you're not going to get it again, right? So you have a tendency to say yes more than you should, or at least you're not prioritizing effectively, and that's it's literally an in-house kind of thing that they need to do a better job of. And you, as the vendor partner, holds you're paying the money for the service. You need to challenge them on that and let them know that if they're going to let somebody else's business slide, it's not going to be yours.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. And that's that difficult conversation, business leaders have to be comfortable having.
Yes. Agreed.
Awesome. Well, I think it was all the questions that we had here. So I think we can probably put a pin in it for today. For those who are listening, this is something we'll do every now and again. And if you have questions, let us know. We do check the comments on our different, platforms where we post the show. You can reach out to us on our websites. And kind of on that note, if people want to learn more about My Biz Coaches, Eric, where can they go to find you?
Yeah, please. You can see it's in the beginning of the episode, but it's mybizcoaches.com. Feel free to go there, check us out, learn a little bit more about who we are and what we do for our clients. I'm not even going to say that the website's coming soon because I don't want to. I don't want to jinx myself at this point, but I know it's coming soon.
Yes.
Yeah, and then certainly on social media platforms, we're on pretty much all the major social media platforms now. So, please feel free to check us out. Link's probably the best place to learn more about us.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. If you want to learn more about the TLG group, head over to trainleadgrow.com. Same thing. Look for us on social media at trainleadgrow is our handle. I'm not sure if that's what the cool kids are saying still these days, but that's our social handle is at trainleadgrow. So search for us. We'd love to connect with you. And for both of us, that's a great way to ask your questions as well. We're both actively monitoring social media. So send us a DM, comment on one of our posts, and we'd love to feature your question in an upcoming community questions episode. So thanks so much for joining us today. And again, we invite you to like, follow, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time on the Biz Coach Show.